Chapter 19. For the remainder of her days, Zelda would not remember the fogged, murky blur of leaping out of bed or scrambling to find her robe, or the running down the hall as guards and servants filtered out from their discreet spaces, watching her golden hair streak behind her like a banner in the storm. The Yiga and Verena, unsure whether to chase or grab, or simply let her go, as the king issued no command while they gathered behind, and they reluctantly left her to her desperate pace. She wouldn't recall tumbling down the bottom of the staircase to the library landing, though the bruises on her shins over the next week would give her pause. What she would remember was the image of that broken body dumped onto the tablescape of Hyrule, the arm dangling over the edge, dirt and blood staining his nails and cuticles. He wore exactly what he'd been wearing the last time she'd seen him, his blue champion's tunic, with the same stitched and repairs she'd mended over the years while always offering to just make him a new one.
"No, I like this one,"
was his answer.
"You did it so well the first time."
The master's sword was still strapped to his back, unsheathed. It was as if he hadn't put up a fight at all. The mask-muffled voice of a Yiga called out from the opposite door as she leaned over the table, brushing his shaggy bangs from his brow.
"Your Highness, you should probably leave the prisoner until the king." "Prisoner? You're guarding a corpse."
She seethed, baring her teeth like a beast threatening a strike.
"You'll leave me, now."
The sound of footsteps quickly scuttling away as Zelda leaned close to his face, searching for, what, exactly? A clue to his demise? A hint of where he'd been?
"Link,"
she whispered, pressing her hand against his still furrowed brow. The cold and useless sensation of his flesh shocked her, even knowing at first glance that no life remained in this form. The instinctual confirmation of death to her senses was too much, and she yanked herself back. Her sweat-caked palm clung to the fading pallor of his forehead, and as she jerked upward, so did his eyelids. They stared up, through her, empty, glass eyes, devoid of spirit not from his lack of life, but his lack of existence. This wasn't. She didn't dare to dream it. A madwoman's last grasp at dwindling hope, a slip out of reality she couldn't afford to take. But then, if she was wrong, what was there left to safeguard? Madness would be a respite from her world-cemented fate. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she lifted the skin of his sleeve, revealing his right bicep, where the surge of gloom beneath the castle devoured his flesh away, snaking away its life and color, a wound so egregious that the limb had to be cleaved clean away. Even after its miraculous restoration from Roru, Link had been left with a thin silver scar that ringed around the sever point just north of his elbow. A reminder Link flexed with pride, and a native melancholy.
"I miss that arm,"
he'd admitted to her more than once.
"You miss not being able to magically repair the roof."
She teased through coffee and warm blankets and slippers, fresh-cut garden flowers in milk jars, the horses grazing in the stable, pumpkin vines curling through the dirt, their blossoms a promise. Everything small and soft they culled without powers. This body bore no memory. She swiftly tugged the sleeve back down, a fresh new panic rooting in her frantic heart. If Link wasn't dead, then where was he? And who else but the hero could have outfitted this spot on Yiga Imposter with his true effect? If Link had sacrificed the Master Sword to sell the illusion, then it was imperative that Ganondorf believe he was dead. And believe that Zelda also believed it. Her thoughts shifted to the delicate scale emerging in her mind, the fury she must wield to sell her grief, and the authentic resignation she'd need to remain in the Demon King's graces. Too thick on either side, and she risked at the very least alienating him, or worse, shattering the fragile illusion that she'd surrendered her deepest heart, in which case, her usefulness would expire very quickly. A bitter filament of anger snaked around her gut as she leaned over the illusion, outrage as unexpected as it was ferocious. He had not, in fact, returned to save her, had not died trying, had not left her so much as a hint that he was any closer to returning. No indication of how long she would remain here while cementing ever more into this strange mirrored version of herself, haunting a life she'd once refused. The cast setting so tightly she had to wonder how she'd ever break out. And now, on sheer inference, she must bear another lie, indulge another condition to her survival, toward a respite she had no reassurances would ever arrive.
Damn you!
She whispered under her breath, wrathful tears catching her lashes as she bent over this useless impostor, just as the king and his entourage joined her.
Who is responsible for this?
Ganondorf demanded, calling forth the trio of Yiga that she'd beaten back from their cautious vista against the bookshelves.
That would be me, your Supreme Highness.
The well-dressed commander raised his hand above his foot soldiers, his starched collar sticking rigidly as he attempted a bow.
You,
Zelda snarled.
You bested a royal knight of Hyrule wielding the Master Sword. Well, you see, he wasn't. It wasn't a fight exactly.
He stammered.
I just found him sleeping up in the Dueling Peaks Pass, and I stabbed him before. You know, he woke up and got any ideas or anything. You executed a man who was sleeping,
she cried, honing her frustration into a fine point as she advanced on him.
You had every opportunity to bring him here as a prisoner, and instead, you don't even grant your king the privilege of deciding his fate. Zelda,
Ganondorf growled, his voice a tug on her leash. She shrank back obediently, her incandescent gaze falling to simmer against the parquet floor.
You said you discovered him in Dueling Peaks? Yes, Your Highness. While you were on patrol? Well, you know, I don't actually follow the grunts out on patrol,
he said, indulging a laughter he assumed the king would join, instead coughing to cover the awkward guffaw that spiked alone in the library.
My soldiers spotted a tent on the roadside, which, obviously, isn't allowed with the travel ban and all. So they came back to the camp we've got at Fort Heteno to let me know, and I went to go check it out on my own. And so you returned, found the kingdom's most wanted fugitive passed out on his bedroll, and stabbed him through the back.
Ganondorf clarified.
That's right, Your Majesty,
he said, draining the red clinging fabric as his chest swelled with pride.
I see. Then it seems that the Queen is correct,
he said, ushering the Verena forward with one curl of his finger.
You have denied us both the satisfaction of seeing to Link's demise on our own, which is truly unforgivable.
The Yiga grunts fled out of the way as their fearless leader was locked between the deceptively strong Gerudo's elbows, dragged as he begged for reconsideration.
No. I'm sorry, Your Highness. It wasn't me. Actually, I swear, it was them. Those stupid lackeys over there. They've ruined everything. I would have brought him alive if it was me. Of course I would have. This isn't my mistake. It isn't my...
The doors slammed, though whether he ended in the moat or lockup or gallows she wouldn't learn. The king shifted to the matter on the table, thumbing his chin through the length of his beard, his brows creasing down as he beheld this strangest of victories with Zelda hinged between them. He must, she conceded, be testing the gravity of his own scale, how much triumph he could savor, how much charity he must show his tenuously secured prize. He had, after all, invested much in cultivating their arrangements. He had to know that there was only so much brunt force he could apply before she'd simply shut down.
The blade is still a threat, isn't it?
Lena spoke, gesturing to the Master Sword wedging up from his back.
It's nothing now,
Zelda said.
The one who could wield it is dead. Until a chosen hero is born again, it will remain an empty promise.
Ganondorf's hand raised to grasp it, which she gripped mid-air, halting.
You mustn't touch it,
she warned.
Destroying you was the reason it was forged. Even if it isn't warring against you, the slightest nick will melt the skin right from your bones. Remember?
His eyes widened and his mouth gaped ever so slightly, apparent shock at the gesture. She held up her long kimono sleeve to Lena.
Cut it,
she ordered. Lena slid her scimitar just below Zelda's arm, and a waterfall of black silk tumbled to the floor. Circling around to the back of the table, she drew the Master Sword from Link's back, wrapping the glinting blade tightly in the shroud.
It's safest now where you can see it,
she said, drawing the bundle to her chest.
Enemies close,
he said, biting back a smirk.
What do we do with the body?
Lena asked.
Zelda.
Her name again, softer this time, a deference. She drew a sharp breath, hugging the lifeless steel against her heart.
Burn it. Burn it all. As quickly as you can.
With a nod to the guards, she turned away, retreating toward the east wing stairs. The king didn't follow her. Not tonight. The court of witnesses lowered their heads to the queen that, for the first time since her arrival, felt as if she were truly theirs. Not a charge, but a privilege. By her grace. Behind his mask, the Fort Hateno foot soldier drank up every movement of his queen as she passed. Her slow steps in the flowing robe, the wave of her hair let down from its place, the somber glistening jewels around her neck, drawing away the very light they refracted, the thickness of her lashes hooting her eyes, weighted down by exhaustion. His love, his vow, she was safe. And he, at last, was here. End of chapter 2.